Well, good evening, fellow coffin dodgers. It's your old coffin dodger back here again, and it's the 1st of February 2020. We have 7 more days to go until our general election, where we will get to decide on who is going to rip us off for the next 5 years, because that's just what all we can expect, judging by what I've been reading and listening to the last couple of days. Europe is in mourning. We have just lost a dearly beloved family member, the family of the European Union that they're trying to convince us is a family. They've been trying to convince us that for years and years and years. And now one of that family has left the European Union, and therefore the rest of us are all in mourning. Isn't it funny though, the way they have tried to sell us this idea of us being a family, all these different countries, different nations with different personalities, with different backgrounds, with different cultures, with different languages, that they are all, or that we all are a family, whereby they have nothing better to do and nothing is more important to them than to destroy the family as we know it. They have targeted the family for years now in different ways, making it almost impossible to be a family, and have convinced people that we don't need families. You see, families are the microcosm of the world, really. Everything you need to know about systems. A good big family basically will represent the whole world within it, because there are bosses, there are servants, there are cooperations, there are political diplomacy. Everything happens within a family that also happens on a greater scale. But they don't like families, because families stick together through thick and thin. And they defend themselves and defend each other from outside attack. Now, they have been so attacked themselves that many of them have fallen and are very, very weakened. One of the top priorities of communism, and it's even written in the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels, is to destroy the family. So our governments have used and are using every tool in the toolbox to achieve a breakdown of the family structures. They pitch man against woman, woman against man. They pitch the children against their parents. In the referendum, the rights of the child, the state ended up with more authority over our children than the parents themselves. What we are now doing as parents is practically feeding and clothing these children for them to manipulate and use as they see fit, and to indoctrinate as they see fit. And that is becoming more and more evident as the years go by. It wasn't all that evident at the beginning. People thought it was just a measure to give the state more freedom to go into a family where there was a lot of abuse going on and to take charge. But in actual fact, it is that they take charge completely of all the children of the nation. That is becoming very evident now in the education that our children are enjoying. I don't know if I can even say that word, they're enjoying an education, because what they're enjoying is an indoctrination. And at the moment there's a debate going on about whether the sex education that is planned, where children are going to learn everything from a very early age from complete strangers in a cold, technical, environment where they will learn all about the birds and the bees in a way that is so graphic that many parents don't want that. So with this fact in mind, that we are entering a final phase of the installation of the New World Order, which is communism. It is dictatorship. And believe you me, I know all about communism because I had very, very close relations with the communist East Germany. I was married to an East German, and he spent 2 years in prison for having a different opinion. So I know all about free speech and what it can do to a person under communist rule. He spent 2 years in prison, and most of that in isolation because he was quite obstinate and he annoyed them all the time. So in the end then they broke one of his fingers, just snapped a door on his finger, and he was a musician. So he then got out to the west of Germany where we both lived, and from then on, and this was 1974, from then on we had no contact with our relations in East Germany. The only contact we had was to be able to send letters and parcels and make the odd phone call, but all the phone calls were monitored, all the letters were steamed open and read and censored, all the parcels were pilfered, and nobody was allowed in of our family into East Germany, or nobody was allowed out because my mother-in-law, she was in the education system, and she definitely was not allowed to have contact with the Western defectors. So I know so much about it that I could spend 10 podcasts telling you what will happen if you go to the polls and you vote for these people. So I want you to be very, very discerning of who you vote for this time around. This is a turning point. And it's very important that firstly, you look for freedom. You look for freedom of speech. You look for freedom to conduct your life as you would like it, without rules and regulations, without somebody telling you when to drive your car, what car to drive. That's just one example. Where to send your kids to school, whether to vaccinate your kids or not. These are all decisions that you're going to have to make now, and you will be responsible, the same as you were responsible for the abortion referendum that now has taken the lives of so many children that weren't allowed to be born. Now, we know that Mr. Harris and a couple of more are on the way out because they're useless anyway, but that is not going to change. That's not going to reverse things. What we need is completely new people in there, and these new people are presenting themselves as good as they can. They're called the Freedom Party, the Irish National Party. Then there's Renew is another one. There's independents standing in lots of constituencies, and they have life written on their flags. They have freedom of speech written on their flags. They have border restrictions written on their flags. So what I'm just saying today is here, you will be responsible for what kind of government we're going to have next week.
There's no regrets, no tears goodbye. I don't want you back. We'd only cry.
I'm going to continue now with another coffin dodger. I stumbled upon him while I was researching the China virus there. I'm talking about Prince Philip because he's quite old and he's been quite ill the last while back, and while we all wish him continued health and happiness in Buckingham Palace, I'd just like to quote him here this evening. He said at one stage, human population growth is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival. We're in for a major disaster if it isn't curbed. We have no option. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it will be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation and war. And then he's quoted as having said by different sources, so I guess he did say it, "If I were reincarnated, I would wish to be returned to Earth as a killer virus to lower human population levels." Then he goes on to wonder what it would be like to be reincarnated in an animal whose species has been so reduced in numbers that it was in danger of extinction. What would be its feelings towards the human species whose population explosion had denied it somewhere to exist? "I must confess," that's him talking, "I must confess that I am tempted to ask for reincarnation as a particularly deadly virus." So is it any wonder it's called the coronavirus? You know, corona, the meaning of that word is crown. Of course, there are many interpretations of this virus and many viewpoints. It has emerged the last couple of days that it is actually a man-made mutation of a previous virus in which a strand of SARS virus was inserted. So it's actually a genetically modified organism, a GMO virus. And that's what some scientists have said, and I'm inclined to believe that particular version because we have much the same information, or we did get much the same information regarding the HIV virus, which claimed a good number of lives and is still claiming lives. Here it is out of the horse's mouth, out of Mr. Mountbatten's mouth, Mr. Battenberg, Mr. Mountbatten, Prince Philip, as he's commonly known as. A shaky interview here.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Not your guess.
Well, it could be on a spectrum from mass sterilisation to greater availability of contraception. I don't know what your views are as to what can be done about it.
Well, I think it might be described as voluntary family limitation.
He belongs to the elites, or the elite, as they are commonly called. We use that word very carelessly because anybody could belong to that group that are above a certain income level. But there is a circle of people on the top, on the very top of the pyramid, who are holding the strings of society. They're the ones who determine which direction the society is going to take, which direction they are going to take to attain more power over us and to manipulate us into servitude. And Prince Philip, that family is one of these circle at the top. And what we are dealing with today is a situation basically that is none other than the temptation of Jesus in the desert when he fasted for 40 days and the devil came along and tempted him and told him to create bread out of stones to relieve his hunger, and to leap from the pinnacle and rely on angels to break his fall, or to kneel before Satan in return for all the kingdoms of the world. These are things that we're all faced with on a daily basis. And these temptations, they sound so alien to us. We think, well, that has nothing to do with us. We are just working class people. We are working and wanting to feed our family and build a little house and a little home with 1.2 children, or 1.4, I think it is right now. And this has nothing to do with us. But that is a reductionist approach to life, and it is also a great temptation to fall for Satan's lures. And the temptations are interpreted as three things, which are hedonism, egoism, and materialism. Hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure, that everything has to make you feel good. You only do things that make you feel good, and that satisfy your basic instincts, that build you up, rather than the opposite, which would be to build other people up. And egoism, of course, is commonly known as just being somebody who puts themselves right in the middle of everything, that the sun revolves around you and you are the only person that counts, and you take and you give everything according to you. Or better said, ego is at the centre of everything else. That's egoism. And materialism, of course, is the pursuit of material possessions in every sense of the word, whether it is clothing, furniture, houses, cars. These things will never satisfy us deep down. And of course, this is illustrated in the temptations in the desert of Jesus. He had fasted 40 days. We know from the poor hunger strikers in the north of Ireland, and I always remember them, and I always think of them when I'm fasting or when I hear about people fasting. They fasted 60 days before, I think, the first one died, which was Bobby Sands. So a person can fast for a long, long time. I had a sister, she didn't eat for weeks and weeks. I think it was up on 6 weeks as well before she passed away. So you can fast a long time, but you are very, very weakened. So he was in a weak position then, as many of us are, because God has been taken away, and we have allowed God to be taken away from our daily lives. We just visit him now on a Sunday just to keep the tradition going. But he has been taken away, and we don't rely on God anymore for our existence and for our satisfaction and for everything here that could be a temptation to us. But Jesus was strong because he knew where he came from and where he was going back to, and he knew the lures of Satan. So he was well able to stand up to that. We know that these Elites come together on an annual basis, at least, in a group called the Bilderberg Group. And they come together. I think there are a certain number of participants who are permanent, and each year they invite representatives of different governments and different organisations to be their guests. And in the past couple of years, we've noticed that Pascal Donoghue has been there, Cowan has been there, Coveney has been there, and you can bet your bottom dollar that shortly afterwards, or within a 12-month period, things will begin to change in the area that they are responsible for. They will get orders from these other bankers and secret society members to take home with them and to implement in the country that they operate in. So these are the real elites. The rest of us are high earners or low earners and celebrities who are also being used. Most celebrities are only celebrities because they are in the grips of the industry, the music industry, the film industry. They are modern day slaves, because once they have reached a certain popularity and have been established as a celebrity and as a god, these are gods, they are demigods, because we get to adore them, we get to follow them, we get to use them as a role model. And once they get to that pinnacle of success, they have no way to determine their own lifestyle or anything like that. It's all laid out for them. And you might be wondering about the sudden deaths and all that kind of thing. That is also planned and carried out by the puppeteers, or at least a majority of them. Of course, there are people there who on their own merits have achieved a celebrity status and who are at the top of their professions and who control their own destiny. But most of these young ones are in the grips of handlers. It's not that much different with our politicians, because believe you me, the politicians who are in the leadership roles, who are way up there and leading their departments, they are not there by qualifications or because they are particularly talented to do that job. It's because they are either the brother, the sister, they are related to somebody in a corporation somewhere on the planet, people with influence and who want to influence our society. It's like Facebook. Facebook has a monopoly. Facebook pays hardly any taxes, but determines so much in our society today in Ireland here. So everybody is dependent on everybody else in the upper echelons of our society. And we do know as well that Simon Coveney's brother has a key position in RTE. Do you know what I mean? So there we have government, relatives in our state media, in our state TV station, in our state radio station, which are presenting us news. But is it really news? Is it the real news? No, it's not. The real news is what we present to you as YouTubers and BitChuters and onliners. We're trying to get the real truth out there to you, because nobody will tell you how much you are under control, and you will be even more under control if they get their way. And talking about control, the events there today in Dublin on the streets outside the Dáil, where there were silent protesters protesting the planned hate speech laws, and these hate speech laws are nothing else than the communist attempts to keep dissenting voices silent, to keep them out of the equation, not to have... Remember I told you what happened to my husband, who was basically speaking up for himself, speaking up for a society that he didn't want to live in, and he wanted to pursue his musical career, but wasn't allowed to do so because rock and roll wasn't accepted in a communist society back then. So today we saw something similar. There were the silent protesters, and they had a crowd of hooligans across the road trying to silence them, the silent protesters. Isn't that just absolute crazy? So everything is being controlled. They are trying to control us. completely and utterly. So, all the more reason to cast your vote wisely this coming Saturday. And while we're talking about it, I must mention another thing that came to my mind, and it was that the 8th of the 2nd also has a completely different... Do you remember I talked about it in the last podcast about numbers and what they might mean and about the significance of that particular date? But another thing came to my mind. We're still talking about the 8th Amendment, and it's the second chance to reverse, or at least to do something about the vote that we cast to allow our children to be killed in the womb. We have a second chance on the 8th, 8-2. So do remember that when you're in the polling booths, and also remember that there won't be a third chance, because we are going to cement, we are either going to cement the situation we've had the past couple of years, or we're going to turn things around. So hopefully it will be the latter, that we will turn things around, that we will shake them up so much that they're going to have to review their evil plans for our Irish society as we know it, or against our Irish society as we know it, because they are not planning in our favour. They are planning in favour of the European Union, of the United Nations, of the New World Order, where church and state will be subordinate to the elites. And I suppose now is as good a time as any other to give you some information about online trolling and online shills, because that is also about control, and it goes under the name of disassociative anonymity. It's a psychological study that I found about the activities online, where people can be encouraged to be more deviant, rude and racist, or an online jerk in general. It has to do with the sense of invisibility online. The same people, I've seen that again and again, the same people who are so rude in your face and so disgustingly insulting in your face online, they are the very ones who are unable to open their mouths when you speak to them personally. And I have one very, very good example of that, where he's actually a candidate now here in Cavan Monaghan. And I remember way back a couple of years ago when they were the water charges protests, I tried to interview this particular candidate, or this particular person at the time, who organised the Cavan protest, and I couldn't get 3 words out of him. But in the meantime, and since then, he's standing as a candidate for People Before Profit. Now, the interesting thing is that he's also come back from Australia to stand for this particular election, and I would be really interested to find out how he has fared so well in Australia, because he says he had to go there to work, that he can come here for an election and then probably go back again, because hopefully he won't be voted into anything. But who's paying for these fares? And that would be very interesting. But that's a perfect example of a person who cannot say anything to your face. If you meet them one-to-one, they are just unable to engage. But it's the same with these guys who are being so destructive there in Dublin today, When they see themselves as holding a majority position, they are more likely to express their true opinion. But if they fear their opinion is in a minority, this goes for us as well, they may fear being ostracised. This phenomenon is known as the spiral of silence theory. This is developed in the 1960s and 70s by a woman called Elisabeth Neumann. I think I've heard of her in Germany. The theory seeks to describe how public opinion is formed and how certain behaviours are acceptable in public or in different spaces. It's a longer article, but it goes on then to look at personality traits. And it says here clearly the functionality of the internet explains why some people behave in a disrespectful way online. However, personality traits are also likely to be a key component. Indeed, one study entitled "Trolls Just Want to Have Fun" found that online trolls are more likely to be horrible people in real life. I wonder if that's the reason that they come out with masks and they have their faces covered, so they think they're anonymous behind these face covers. Specifically, this study wanted to see whether trolls were linked with the darkest personality traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. They carried out a survey of 1,200 people. The survey found that people ranking trolling as their top pastime on the internet were more likely to score highly for dark personality traits. In particular, trolls were linked with traits associated with sadism in the real world. So there you go now, trolls. I know exactly who you are. So I will attach this link of this study below here in the description box, just for your information and for your education. And do you remember when I was talking about the European Union and the stars, the 12 stars that are on it? Some people seem to think still that these stars represent the countries that are members of the European Union, but that is not the case as far as I'm informed and as far as I'm aware. They have a completely different significance. Firstly, they are formed in a circle like a crown. I don't know whether I said that before, but that is what they look like, a crown. And also they represent the very spiritual number 12, which is found repeatedly in different situations, like the 12 apostles or the 12 months in the year and the 12 tables of Roman law, which were the first written law in the Roman Empire, when they decided that the laws needed to be written down, and they were written on 12 tablets and displayed somewhere in Rome, I suppose, at the time. But there's one that is particularly interesting. It's about paternal power, and the rule that comes under that is that a notably deformed child shall be killed immediately. To a father shall be given over a son the power of life and death. If a father thrice surrenders a son for sale, the son shall be free from the father. You can look these up for yourselves. It's called, just put in your search engine, the 12 tables of Roman law. And I think if you even start off with the 12 tables, like I did, you will be guided to different websites.
There's no regrets, no tears goodbye. I don't want you back. We'd only cry.
So I will now love you and leave you, and finish off with a little piece that I very primitively nabbed from YouTube. I found it when I was clicking through things there last night, and the group is called the Darling Buds, and they are from a few miles down the road from where I live. And the singer is called, her name is Fiona Fitzpatrick, a very, very talented young woman. And I think this song is about what happened when they built the bypass around Belturbet from Cavan on the Enniskillen route. People no longer needed then to go through Belturbet, so the town started to decline the minute the bypass was opened, and they sing about it is 10 years too late for this to be happening. I think they're referring to that. I'm not quite sure, but I think they are. And she's a lovely, lovely woman, lovely singer, and it's local. And I love to play local unsigned artists either way. I hope you liked my little Walker Brothers insert there as well. No regrets. Wow, I love the Walker Brothers. I used to love them. And that Scott Walker has the most... He still had, before he died there last year, he had the most kissable mouth I've ever seen. Now, that's enough of that. More of that another time. Look after yourselves and look out for one another.
Sure they'll plant us evergreen.